Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's me, Robert Phoenix, channeling my inner Ted Kaczynski today, apparently. And we are going to go into some interesting spaces and places today on this pre recorded version of the Friday FARcast. First of all, let me just get some business out of the way before I hit play on the video. Uh, of course, this show is brought to you by True Hemp Science. And let me bring up my banner here. So True Hemp Science has been a partner now, I think going on 2 years. And I have known Chris officially since I think I met Chris not long after I moved to Austin. So I would think it was 2014. So I've known Chris for about 10 years now. And my relationship with him started off at Central Market, sort of in the not quite center of Austin, but kind of close. And I did a reading for him there at Central Market, and we've continued to build a friendship and connection over the years. And I had watched his development around the sea. Literally, he would be sending me samples of the things that he was making in real time, and I would get them in little plastic straws or little tiny vials. And uh, where he is now with his CBD production is light years from where he started. And where he started was actually pretty good, right? Pretty good. But I've seen him grow and evolve over time. And it must have been about 2 years ago when the light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, we're friends and he has this amazing product. So why don't we work together? And I get to tell more people about the product, and hopefully he gets to sell more of his CBD. And it's been a really good partnership. So here's the deal. If you go to truehempscience.com and you spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, you will get a free goodie bag with your order. And the goodie bags they're generous. They're generous little samples that he includes, and usually as supplements to whatever it is you're buying. You're going to get something that you're not buying. It's the whole idea behind it. If you spend $150 or more, you'll get free shipping, and there's always a money-back guarantee within a 30-day period. And if you go to truehempscience.com, you can actually make an appointment with Chris, and he will consult with you about which of the CBD products he has that might be suitable for you and your needs. So there you go. It's your one-stop shop. Okay, we got that out of the way. Hit the like button. If you're here and you're watching this live, hit the like button. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, I heartily recommend you subscribe to the channel, because we're always doing something here. The only day that we're not doing anything is Monday or Saturday, but Tuesday through Thursday, we have the Astro Weather. Friday, we have the Friday FARcast. Sunday night, Astro Live. Oh, well, Monday night, we are doing something. So only Saturday, Monday night, Serious Sports with the great Al Dog. So you get lots of different content, lots of different perspectives. You get some high strange, deep sinks, some conspiracy stuff, holistic health stuff, truth stuff, astrological stuff, sports stuff. Cover a lot of bases here. So, and we have probably the best chat on the internet. I don't have, and I know there's some great shows out there. I know there's some great shows, great groups, but I'll put Chattario right near the top of the pyramid. So that's another added bonus. You get to hang out with really cool people in real time. And so many friendships have blossomed out of this connection. We've had marriages come out of this connection, relationships start. It's been very still waiting for the first Chattarian baby. Still waiting for that. We need to have a Chattarian baby, and who knows? It might just happen. You never know. And to qualify, by the way, to qualify to be a Chattarian baby, you have to be two people that have met through Chattaria and then had a baby. Maybe we do something with Chris. Maybe we can incentivize this, and that your baby would get CBD for life or something like that. Wouldn't that be cool? All right. Enough of the silliness. Let's get into this. Let me set the stage here a little bit. I don't know how it came across Alex's Twitter feed, whether he started following me or I don't know what happened, but I was watching this feed like, man, this is a really interesting Twitter feed. And then I posted something about Jill St. It was this thing with this weird connection between Henry Kissinger and Jill St. John in the movie Diamonds Are Forever, and the weird connection with Jill St. John with Cary Grant's stepson, and then there was somebody else. And it was like this weird 6 degrees of separation. And then Alex chimed in with some Kubrick reference, numbers, and math. I'm like, oh fuck, this is interesting. And then he did it again with something else. And so I've been keeping an eye on his Twitter feed. And I think it was probably about a week ago. I've been thinking about it for a while. And about a week ago, I thought, geez, maybe 2 weeks. I said, geez, Alex would make a really good guest on the show. I think he'd have great content. And I was just thinking about it. And it was really the crystallization of the thought. And then he pops up on Twitter and says, I'm available for interviews and podcasts. I'm like, oh, here we go, right? We were supposed to do this a week ago. We were going to do it on 3/11, or 4 days ago, but we kind of missed the window, and we did it yesterday. So yeah, yesterday, and it's a really, really great interview, and again, to kind of set the stage, he has kind of figured out the gematria of Stanley Kubrick. And when you hear him unfold these things, it takes you into a place where it brings up a lot more questions than answers. Like, what is the nature of reality? And what is sort of this weird, strange attractor, or whatever you want to call it, behind reality? And why does Stanley Kubrick seem to have his fingerprints across all of these characters, not only in the 20th century, but in other eras as well? It's mind-boggling. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I came up with the title for today's show, is Stanley Kubrick as Time Lord. And when you look at Kubrick from a physical standpoint, he looks very Capricornian to me. When he's young, he has much more hair than he does, obviously, as he's older. He looks very Capricornian to me, and because he looks old, right? He looked older than his age was in a lot of ways. And often when you put Capricorns, you get kind of asymmetrical faces. Like, they're not perfect. There's always something slightly off. He also looks slightly Piscean as well in his disheveled nature. It's another part of Kubrick's development over the years. But when I look at him, I just get this real Capricornian vibe. And of course, Capricorn rules time. We'll get into that a little bit in the interview. So without any further delay, let's bring this up here and let's play Stanley Kubrick as Time Lord with Alex Fulton of Kubrickology. Let's do this. Cinema layout, and away we go. As promised, we've got Alex from Crypto Kubrology. I'm sorry, I fucked it up. Did I fuck it up?
No, that's right. That's right. Perfect.
Crypto Kubrology.
You can also say Crypto K for short.
Crypto K, and Alex has a Twitter feed on X and also on Substack under the same name. And I started following Alex on Twitter, and unbeknownst to me, he was part of Always Record YouTube video that happened a while ago now, like 4 or 5 years ago or something like that.
I think more. It was like 2017, I think. It was right around when Trump had just gotten elected. So that was a while ago now.
That was a really interesting recording because there were some fascinating people that were on that recording. And you being one of them. And thanks for reminding me of that. And so honestly, I started to see what you were doing with these dates in Kubrick. And, I was just blown away because I love synchronicities and syncs, and you're using Stanley Kubrick as like your Rosetta Stone for a lot of this stuff, and kind of uncoiling this, I don't know, kind of arcane and high strange version of reality. So how did you stumble upon Kubrick? Were you a fan of the movies? Did all of a sudden the things just start to pop? Sure. How did that happen?
Oh, well, it probably mirrors a lot of people's sort of rabbit hole experience, but it was sort of just like I was a big fan of art, literature, movies, and stuff in high school when I was younger, growing up, kind of leaning towards psychedelics and that kind of thing. And Kubrick was just always there. Always loved, I had watched his movies when I was younger, probably too young, in some cases, and I was just a big fan. But then I sort of got into the conspiracy sort of realm with Loose Change and 9/11 and all that. So I kind of just fell down that rabbit hole, learning about just all the stuff that I kind of had just not really thought about up until that point. So JFK and UFOs and all kinds of weirdness. And eventually,
so how old were you when you started to watch Loose Change?
I was like 19, I think, first time.
Yeah.
And then it was like, just couldn't stop myself, and eventually kind of incorporated that in my worldview. But then I kind of kept going deeper and deeper, and I was looking for more and more kind of connections, as you do. And I kind of started to become less satisfied with the terrestrial kind of explanations for everything, and even the terrestrial aliens, like from Pleiadians or whatever. But so eventually, I don't know how it happened, but I stumbled upon a essay about Eyes Wide Shut by a guy who used to be called the Wrong Way Wizard. He had a blog, and it was this long, detailed analysis of Eyes Wide Shut from the synchronistic perspective. So he started it off with a picture of the Devil tarot card and saying, this is Stanley Kubrick and Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, and this is what he's doing. And then he had this really crazy idea that Eyes Wide Shut was actually meant to be set in the after period of 9/11. So it was a post 9/11 movie, even though it came out 2 years before. The implication being that Kubrick, knew about or helped even plan the events of 9/11 and was putting it into his movie. So that just kind of sparked my interest. And from there, I met up with the Sync Book people and got into Sync blogs and Synchronicity, which was kind of all about decoding on a sort of symbolic, unconscious, archetypal level, pop culture and movies and stuff like that, which of course just was what I did already, or I loved movies, so it just made sense. And from there, the the Sync crew kind of fractured after Trump got elected, and I started talking to this other guy named Sean Montgomery, who had a website called Cryptocubrology. He's the guy that came up with that phrase. And he had this just most intense, detailed breakdowns of Kubrick's stuff on his Flash website in like 2012 or so. And so I started messaging with him. It was just like, I want to know more. Who can give me more information here? And so I started emailing with him. And he's the one that sort of uh, introduced this whole like numerology aspect to it and the tracking of these numbers through history and basically everything that I do now. I kind of picked up from him. He taught me that. And we, for the past 5 years or however long it's been now, we've been kind of going back and forth, emailing each other with just all kinds of research and syncs, just playing off one another and have been kind of mapping the 20th century in a way with this numerological kind of structure. And of course, it all kind of centers around Kubrick as a kind of patient zero for synchronicity, like just around. He's kind of like a vortex of around things.
Yeah, yeah.
Things just
So I
like
can
an
say
event
he
horizon.
feels like a vortex.
Yeah. So that pretty much. I mean, from that point, it's just been me and him going back and forth. And I published this thing on my Tumblr, like right when I first got into this, and I was publishing the thing about yeah, that one then was about Stanley Kubrick in 666 days, which is pretty remarkable and kind of a crowd pleaser. But and then which I'll talk about in a second. But after I published that, I sort of like realized the enormity of the task and like I wasn't sure what I was even doing, so I kind of backed out. And I've just been, you know, in the dark basically working on this for several years now. And now I'm finally at the point where I'm kind of ready to like release. And that's why I've been publishing stuff on my Substack and Sean and I are working on a book together about the whole thing. So that kind of brings us up to speed, I think, on how I
Yeah,
got.
yeah. It's really interesting to talk about syncs. You know, uh, y- because I follow you on Twitter X, and I was just thinking, man, Kubrickology would make a really good guest. And then you posted literally the day
Yeah,
I was going to reach out to you,
yeah,
right? You
that was
posted that
perfect.
you were available for interviews, and I'm like, this is great.
Yeah,
This is right on time. So I want to ask you two questions, and then we'll dig in. The first question has to do with the first Kubrick movie you saw. What was the first one you saw?
first Kubrick movie I saw, I think it was A Clockwork Orange, actually,
Oh wow,
and I was pretty
how old
young.
were
I
you?
was like, um, it would have been like, I would have been like 12, 13, probably, maybe
That's an
14.
intense film for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even like to watch it. I don't like to watch it now as an adult. So I don't know. I think when you're a kid, you kind of just you don't understand things, so it's just like kind of washes over you. So I didn't really get why it was so horrible, even though it's kind of obvious. But yeah, anyway, that was my first thing, and then I kind of went. I think I saw 2001 after that, and you know, honestly, I can't remember. I think The Shining came a lot later.
Yeah,
So I mean, I liked Kubrick, but I wasn't like a huge mega fan. It was just like one of the filmmakers that I liked, and
right.
Ridley Scott and some others and stuff. But it was once I got to be an adult and realized and really and saw Sean and Mark's breakdown that I realized, wow, this is more than film. This is something on another level. There's something going on with these movies on another level that I have to figure out. Is basically what my feeling was, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
The-
So,
Well, the other question I wanted to ask you, it's not really a question, but more of an observation. It goes back to something you mentioned earlier, and Eyes Wide Shut being set supposedly in New York after 9/11. And most people who have seen the movie and have paid some attention to it know that it was actually shot in London,
mhm,
even though it was portrayed as New York.
yeah.
I I always felt that, or whenever I see that film, and I don't know whether it's because it's London, that's a stand-in for New York, but there's something about the city itself that is really unsettling. right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's because it's not New York and it's not a backlot and it's
hmm
London, and London has this deep occult history
hmm
connected to it. I don't know what it is. The first time I saw it, I felt very displaced.
hmm
And upon further viewings of it, I still have that feeling when I watch even the scenes that are supposed to be warm and Christmassy aren't.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah,
It's not a very warm movie. Although the lighting is kind of warm and beautiful a lot of the time.
exactly. Yeah,
But yeah, what I was gonna say was that it's a lot like The Shining in the sense that it's all about impossible spaces and impossible journeys. And so if you track Bill and his wanderings around New York, you find that he's walking in way and moving in places that just logically could not exist. This is a total feels like a dream. And because this, and the same thing happens in The Shining with Danny, the hallways that don't make sense spatially, where there's a window in front of where there should be a hallway, and it's all and his so what he did with Eyes Wide Shut was really perfect what he started to do in The Shining, I think, of creating this like this world that's like folding in on itself all the time, and kind of it doesn't matter where he is, wherever he goes, there he is. I guess is the message of that movie. Um,
yeah.
Dream Story, as it's was
Right. Is
originally
that
called.
what is it? The short story? What is it? The
Schnitzler's
Latrom
novel.
something? What is,
Yeah,
yeah,
Trom Novelle.
Trom
Trom
Novelle.
Novelle.
Yeah. Um,
Which is another actually there's a great sync with that, which is that Schnitzler himself had a daughter who committed suicide. I think she was schizophrenic or something, but she committed suicide on the day Kubrick was born. Um,
in
it's kind of
1928.
in 1928. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I forgot about that till just now, but there's a New Yorker article about Arthur Schnitzler, and it's like on July 26, 1928, Schnitzler's daughter killed herself. And I just had to wonder if Kubrick knew about that. Um,
He
and
was
if that
such
had
a, a,
anything to
a
do with,
fiend for detail. He had to,
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Well, it brings to mind a story. There's a kind of a there's a contradiction, I think, in the way we're presented Kubrick as a person, where we're told that he was this perfectionist, this absolute master of detail, craftsman, but at the same time, we're supposed to kind of believe that there's all these continuity, these errors in continuity and things that he just apparently overlooked. So there's a story, Leon Vitali. You remember him?
Yeah, I saw the documentary, and he actually had to
Yeah,
clean up
right.
The Shining, right?
Well, the story I'm thinking of is he was doing Eyes Wide Shut, and they were
Eyes
editing
wide. It
it.
was eyes wide shut. He had to clean it up. Yeah.
Yeah, they said. Well, he said there's this lens. They're editing it, and there's this long shot. It's like a 5 minute shot, and there's this blaring lens flare right there on the screen the whole time. And actually, Sean and I have been watched it and like detailed Kubrick's use of lens flares and like what it means and all this. But then Leon Vitali comes out and shares this story claiming that Kubrick was like super pissed off at him and got super mad when he realized there was a lens flare in the shot. And I'm just like, what's going on here? He couldn't have just missed that unless he's just a complete incompetent, which is obviously not true. He must have been fucking with Leon Vitali knowing that when he was gone, he would say all this stuff about and sort of further dilute the pool of information about what was going on with those movies. And maybe it's not his fault, or maybe Vitali's making it up. Even I feel like there's a large element of gatekeeping when it comes to Kubrick and his work and
Well,
the
who
details of it.
who would you put in that list? Vitali, Kubrick's wife. Who else?
Jan Harlan, the his stepbrother, his wife's brother, was his producer, and basically they were buddies. I mean, partners, business partners, and Jan Harlan is kind of the publicist for the archive now, I think. And of course, he's just like, oh no, it's he's just very wishy washy on the whole thing. But there's just a lot to Kubrick as a person and the history of him that's it's worth looking into more. but again, we have this kind of unique take on it with the numerological aspect. Like you can find Kubrick conspiracy theories pretty much anywhere, but what we really bring to the table is this numeric thing, which I don't know if you want to talk about that. I'm cool talking about
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, no, let's go to the numeric thing. You mentioned 666 earlier.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
That's a good like starting point because if you'd heard on the internet for a long time, or like trivia notes about Kubrick, you find that okay, Kubrick died 666 days before January 1st, 2001, which was the first day of the year in his movie. And everybody's like, "Wow, that's neat. That's weird." But that's all as far as it would ever go. So once I started getting into this kind of work, I just finally was like, well, wait a second, what happened 666 days before Kubrick died? What happened there? If the principle holds that it goes forward and it means something, then if you go backwards, it might mean something too. And lo and behold, if you do that, you find that that day was the day that the chess playing computer Deep Blue defeated Gary Kasparov for the first time ever in a match. So it's basically and Deep Blue was a chess playing AI developed by IBM that looks exactly like the monolith. It's like designed to look like the monolith, a big black tower, basically. And so, yeah, 666 days before Kubrick dies, a human loses to an AI computer for the first time in chess, and then 66 days after he dies is the first day of 2001, which is a movie in which he depicts a human losing to a chess playing AI, right? So that's like a perfect little example of what we call the so-called parent thesis of creating like a three-way arrangement on the timeline with a midpoint and based on this on a number of different numbers, and you kind of create a sync just by doing that and see and can look at it and study it. And so we just basically applied that principle to everything else and have found some just incredibly amazing things that are
Well,
hard to
all right,
explain. But
let's go. You got to uncoil them. Let's go. Time to
okay,
unpack. Yeah.
well, where should I start? I don't. I guess a good one is Kubrick's birthday because well, here's a good one that I've got. Uh, well, okay, so Kubrick's birthday, as we mentioned before, is also the same day Joe Jackson was born. So you can kind of like these are both like demiurgic kind of figures, right? Like father time kind of thing, where Joe Jackson just was like the patriarch of the Jacksons. So I just kind of keep them in mind together, as well as Michael, because Michael plays into this a lot too. So okay, so Kubrick and Joe Jackson were born 7/26/28, and okay, sorry, I've got my like I said, my head is full of stuff. So, but good one. Okay, one thing that we find is that when you do it with Kubrick, you kind of get him connected to all kinds of cinematic firsts. Like, so for example, if you go 42, if you take Kubrick's birth and you go 42 weeks before that, this was the premiere of The Jazz Singer, which was basically the first sound film ever, the first sync sound.
Yeah.
And that word sync too is another big deal. So the first sync sound film was released 42 weeks before Kubrick was born. And then 42 weeks after Kubrick was born was the first Academy Awards ceremony where Wings won for, you know, Best Picture.
Yeah.
So that just starts off the Oz curse, as I like to call it, the Oz curse. 42 weeks before and after. And so that just kind of continues. And there are interesting things that come out of that and parallels and like for example 237 weeks, I'll say if you go 237 weeks after Kubrick was born, it's the day FDR was declared president. um and then if you kind of switch it to his 19th birthday and you do a parallel thing where you go 237 weeks after his 19th birthday, that's when Queen Elizabeth was declared queen. And Kubrick's 19th birthday is also a big deal because, as I was saying, we were talking about before, is that that's the day the CIA was created. So on July 26, 1947 was the day that Harry S. Truman signed the National Security Act, which created the military-industrial complex, basically as we know it today. And that happened.
You use 237 because of the room in The Shining.
Yes, right. Yes. So Kubrick put a spotlight on the room on the number 237 in The Shining. And so, everybody will say, "Oh, it's just he just did that because the hotel didn't want him to use 217," which I think is funny because it's orders from the house. That's what The Shining is about a hotel that's like controlling Jack. And Kubrick puts himself in the place of Jack in the making of. And so here he is being told by the hotel to change the number to 237, which is another example of a cover story, in my opinion, of some kind. But I think it's funny to think of it that way.
Have you worked with 217 in terms of?
Sure, a little bit.
Yeah.
It has its own kind of elements to it. But 237 is special because it's shown up. It actually, even though Kubrick put a spotlight on it, it's shown up in movies since the 30s, like in very prominent ways. So, for example, and this relates to Kubrick's 19th birthday again, because on Kubrick's 19th birthday, in the same day that the CIA was created, there was a movie release. Joan Crawford had a movie release called Possessed. And it's pretty amazing because you go and you watch this movie from 1947, and in the first 3 minutes, she's walking down the street. It feels a lot like Eyes Wide Shut. She's wandering down the street, kind of in a daze, and then she stops at a cafe, much like the one Bill stops at, and you can see the address on the door above her as she walks through 237, and so she walks through door 237 in this movie called Possessed, which released on Kubrick's 19th birthday. Now, that's pretty great, but there's even more to it because it's one of the only times in Hollywood history where a major star has been in two movies with the same name. Because there was another movie called Possessed. There was another movie called Possessed starring Joan Crawford. This one released in 1931. It was actually like her first big role, I think, and opposite Clark Gable. They met on that set. So if you go and watch Possessed 1931, in the first few minutes, she's walking, she leaves her factory job, she walks home, and she gets stopped at a railroad, and this big train choo-choos by, and on the engine are
So apparently, I have my weekly reboot, which is so bizarre. I apologize for this because I do so many things, uh, streaming, including working with clients and everything else that goes along with that. And it's only when I am here on YouTube does this happen. So let me first apologize because I have to reboot our interview, which hopefully I won't have to do again.
As promised.
Which means I'm going to have to figure out where we are in the interview. And give me just a second here. and I'll do my best to get us up to speed. Again, I apologize, but whatever reason, this occurs only on YouTube. There we go.
The whole story of pen pals that don't like each other, but they fall in love on. That's led by the 237 engine.
7 because of the room in The Shining.
Yes, right. Yes. So Kubrick put a spotlight on the room on the number 237 in The Shining. And so, everybody will say, oh, it's just he just did that because the hotel didn't want him to use 217, which I think is funny because it's orders from the house. That's what The Shining is about a hotel that's like controlling Jack. And Kubrick puts himself in the place of Jack in the making of. And so here he is being told by the hotel to change the number to 237, which is another example of a cover story, in my opinion, of some kind. But it's I think it's funny to think of it that way.
Have you worked with 217 in terms of?
Sure, a little bit. It has its own kind of elements to it. But 237 is special because it's shown up. It actually, even though Kubrick put a spotlight on it, it's shown up in movies since the 30s, like in very prominent ways. So, for example, and this relates to Kubrick's 19th birthday again, because on Kubrick's 19th birthday, in the same day that the CIA was created, there was a movie release. Joan Crawford had a movie release called Possessed. And it's pretty amazing because you go and you watch this movie from 1947, and in the first 3 minutes, she's walking down the street. It feels a lot like Eyes Wide Shut. She's wandering down the street kind of in a daze. And then she stops at a cafe, much like the one Bill stops at. And you can see the address on the door above her as she walks through, 237. And so she walks through door 237 in this movie called Possessed, which released on Kubrick's 19th birthday. Now, that's pretty great, but there's even more to it because it's one of the only times in Hollywood history where a major star has been in two movies with the same name, because there was another movie called Possessed. There was another movie called Possessed starring Joan Crawford. This one released in 1931. It was actually like her first big role, I think, and opposite Clark Gable. They met on that set. So if you go and watch Possessed 1931, in the first few minutes, she's walking, she leaves her factory job, she walks home, and she gets stopped at a railroad, and this big train choo-choos by, and on the engine are stamped 2037.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. So it's like the whole plot of the movie is basically she sees this train go by, and on the train she sees like high society happening. She's a poor little farm girl. She sees high society on the train that's led by the 237 engine, and she wants to be a part of it. And that's what leads her she becomes possessed or whatever and that's kind of an interesting title because there's different ways in which possessed is relevant. But anyway, the clincher here is two movies with Possessed, Joan Crawford, 237. And they actually, if you sync them up, watch them at the same time, 237 is on screen at exactly the same time in both movies. So it's pretty insane. This is we call this the Possessed Matrix. Like, there's just, there's so much going on here that it's hard to accept it as just coincidence, but also just like synchronicity, because in a way that sort of just means the same thing. It's just like, well, it's just something that happened. But to me, it feels more like, you get me on any given day and I'll have a different feeling. But a lot of the time it feels like there's something to this that's more terrestrial, even that there's some kind of signaling going on with this number. So
what's the 237th day of the calendar?
That would be August 25th, which is also a very, very prominent day, like July 26th. The Wizard of Oz first released on August 25th, the 237th day of the year, 1939.
Interesting.
There's a lot of NASA really likes August 25th. I think they timed a lot of their stuff with August 25th. There's a lot of stuff. Sean Connery, 007, was born on August 25th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. August 25th. Yeah, like the Voyager probe, I think, launched on one of those. One of the Voyager probes launched. I haven't
Right on August
tweeted
25th.
about it, but
so where else does 237 take us?
well, okay. I just mentioned the shop, or I'm sorry, I watched. Blah. I mentioned the Wizard of Oz, 1939.
Yeah.
5 months later, which is 153 days, in 1940, they released a movie called The Shop Around the Corner. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Okay, that's a Jimmy Stewart movie. It airs on TV a lot during Christmas. It's actually the movie that You've Got Mail was based on.
Oh yeah.
Like the whole story of pen pals that don't like each other, but they fall in love on paper. So in The Shop Around the Corner, they're the two leads, the place where they place their letters for each other to find is box 237.
Oh wow.
And it's like all over the movie. The whole thing hinges on the final scene where he recites her letter to her saying, "Take me out of box 237 and open my envelope." And it's when she hears that word or that number 237, then she goes, huh? And she realizes like this is the guy. And it's like the whole movie hinges on this number, basically. It's pretty amazing when you watch it.
Wow.
And there, okay. I mean, there are a few other ones from that time period. One of my favorites is called Confidentially Connie. This is like a very just kind of nothing movie, but it's got Janet Leigh in it.
Yep.
1956, early Janet Leigh.
Uh-huh.
And it's a very weird movie. It's all about it's about a meat packing plant. It's very kind of lots of innuendo about meat packing and like husbands and wives being unsatisfied and stuff. And so there's this scene. Anyway, her address in that movie is 237. And there's the scene where she and Van Johnson, who's the opposite guy, they kiss in front of the number, and their faces are like with the number 237 and
crazy
in their face. And that's Van Johnson, and he's also in Possessed.
That's getting weird.
Yeah, so it's just like on and on. Yeah, much emails have been shed trying to figure out this whole Possessed Joan Crawford thing, because the other element is Joan Crawford, because she was kind of like a very interesting.
She's kind of possessed.
Possessed, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just was seeing a thread on Twitter about her connections to the Kennedy assassination too, because she was a Pepsi board member.
That's right.
Yeah. And I guess they met with Kennedy. She was there in Dallas when he died, or she was there the day before, and she was like, "Oh, we won't be going to the dinner for Kennedy tomorrow." And
interesting. Joan had a little insider
Crawford.
trading, huh?
A little bit, I think. So, and there's more to. I mean, everything I bring up, like, you could dive down into, and like there's the fact that Joan Crawford's final movie was Trog, which is a crappy, basically
British movie. Isn't it a British movie?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but the whole thing is that the Trog monster they basically stole one of the 2001 ape masks out of the trash and put it on their guy, and that's the villain of the last Joan Crawford movie.
Seems fitting.
Yeah. So I can go from a second, because Joan Crawford, I mentioned Pepsi.
Right.
Pepsi, there's another guy that was a big Pepsi guy, Michael Jackson.
Right.
Son of Joe Jackson.
Right.
And this is an interesting, he's a great case study, because of what we do with life's people's midpoints of their lives.
Yeah.
So like if someone dies, born, they're died, they have a midpoint.
Yeah.
Everybody has one. And it's even become like sort of shared on mainstream news sites now that Michael Jackson's midpoint, the midpoint of Michael Jackson's life was the day that his hair set on fire while he was filming a Pepsi commercial,
Right. Yeah.
which is like kind of weird. But then if the thing that really makes this crazy is that so his midpoint, the day that happened was January 27th, 1984. And if you search for the age of Kubrick / Joe Jackson, his dad, on that day, it's 666 months.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So back to 666 again.
666. Yeah. So, and then there's an even more of a layer there because July 26th, or that day was the day that the Apple Mac, because you remember the 1984
Yes.
Mac
That was
commercial.
directed by Ridley Scott, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah. That aired on the Super Bowl 18, which is 6 + 6 = 6.
Yeah.
That was January 24th. 2 days later, the Mac actually released the first Mac, released.
I think
And
was
then-
it the Apple II or the Mac SE or one of those two.
I think it was Mac Pro or Mac. It was Mac something.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so Super Bowl, Mac release, and then, so it's a little baby parent thesis. Super Bowl, 2 days, Mac release, 2 days, Kubrick is 666 months old and on Michael Jackson's midpoint. And, you probably remember that first Apple sold for $666.66.
That's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
there's just like lots of stuff like this that on some level it seems like completely unintentional by anybody. This is just strangely the way time works or something like that. But it also feels a little bit like ritual. Like, okay, we're planning this stuff, somehow honoring like Kubrick or Michael Jackson, or somehow like this is like a bid to impress or something like that. There's a lot of ways to think about it.
Right. I mean, that when we get to that level,
Pepsi.
that is sort of we're into the Marianas Trench of this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The intentionality of everything. And that the title of that film, Possessed, is kind of another big trope for it, because that's the sort of feeling that you get, is that these people are possessed in the sense that they don't know what they're doing. They're not meaning to do it, but they're possessed by something that is doing it through them. And that is kind of a big touchstone of an idea for us, because it ties into another aspect, which is the film Being John Malkovich. Have you ever seen that one?
Of course.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Well, that movie released 237 days after Kubrick died.
Okay.
And that movie is all about possession. It's more like it's about puppetry. It's about human puppetry.
Yeah.
And the idea that there are forces that are sort of manipulating us, or can be manipulating us to achieve some kind of end. In that movie, it's about a satanic cult basically that wants immortality.
Yeah.
And so you combine that with Possessed, and there's like, these are just hints. And so, okay, I said that 237 days after Kubrick died, Being John Malkovich, 237 days before Kubrick died was the release of another movie called There's Something About Mary, which you might remember for being a kind of gross out comedy.
Yep.
But what's interesting is the overlaps between There's Something About Mary and Being John Malkovich, because they both have Cameron Diaz in them.
Right.
They actually have both have multiple actors in them. Yeah. See, like this what I'm bringing up to you could be a subject of like a 30-minute like video, just like examining all the syncs between There's Something About Mary and Being John Malkovich. But I guess the main one is one of the actors that's shared, not Cameron Diaz, is a guy named W. Earl Brown. Kind of an obscure guy, but he was in Deadwood. And he's in Bang John Malkovich, and he's in There's Something About Mary. And in There's Something About Mary, he plays the character Warren, who is like he's retarded. Essentially, that's the joke. He's retarded, and he he's Mary's little brother or something like that. But in being John Malkovich, the same guy, he basically plays the first commercial customer of Malkovich. So he's the first guy to go in Malkovich as a paying customer, and he's like, I'm a fat man. Like, I'm not, nobody likes me. So he wants to go be John Malkovich. So he's there, and he's in both movies. In There's Something About Mary, he first shows up. He's wearing a shirt with a Rubik's Cube on it. And he's playing with a Rubik's Cube the whole time. Which is another thing where it's okay, Rubik's Cube. There's like a Kubrick pun in there.
Yeah, there is, right?
It's Kubrick. It's Kubrick. Cube, as the Brits kind of say cube. They put that Q sound in there, where Americans just say coup. But I always think of it as Kubrick because there's so much cubic stuff to his movies. It's just obvious.
Right.
So you got W. Earl Brown with the Rubik's Cube, and then I guess the other thing that I like to bring up with Rubik's cubes is that actually, the world's first speed cubing tournament that ever happened 42 weeks after The Shining premiered.
Oh, wow.
So just these little things. And even actually there's a cube in The Shining, which in a half of a thing that you won't even notice if you watch it once or twice or three times, you won't even notice. But there's a scene where there's a cube, red, white, and blue cube on a table, and it disappears and it reappears. And the same thing happens in There's Something About Mary. So what you find basically when you do this with something like There's Something About Mary is you find the same tropes that are being expressed in The Shining, being expressed almost everywhere else. It just seems to be everywhere. So when There's Something About Mary, there's like the scene where he's the private detective. He's spying on Mary. She's like undressing in the window. He's got his binoculars on him. He's waiting for her to take her shirt off. Then he looks away and he looks back, and it's the wrong window, and it's her old aunt who is like wrinkled and shriveled, kind of just like the Room 237, where the beautiful blonde turns into the old hag, essentially.
Well, that's an interesting correspondence.
Yeah, so there's lots of that kind of thing where, and I know that it becomes really apparent when you sync these movies, which is something that I actually do. Is like you
watch them simultaneously.
Yeah, watch it, and with The Shining too. I put The Shining in a little small window, and then have There's Something About Mary and Being John Malkovich playing at once, and it turns it into a whole different experience. Very interesting, and it's very enlightening, and it's very trippy, very psychedelic.
You got to switch on a bunch of your parts of your brain in order to,
or switch off some of the.
Maybe that's true too, but to track everything, right? You got to be tracking.
Yeah.
And
certainly helps to be like, have your final cut, and you can just frame by frame and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is kind of like, I kind of see it as it's not watching movies. It's more like archaeology almost. It's like etheric archaeology, as I think I called it once. Like just like the idea of a film being like a hyperdimensional object rather than just a movie.
Right.
There's like stuff going on all the time on a level that nobody's really aware of, but that Kubrick really illuminated it better than anyone else somehow.
Right. Absolutely. I'm going to stop you for a second.
Okay.
Because I got two very interesting occurrences on August 25th.
Okay.
All right.
Let's hear it.
So now you got me playing the game. Okay.
That's
all
fine.
right. So check this out. Listen to this one. This is good. In 1935, August 25th, the first great moon hoax article was published in the New York Sun announcing the discovery of life and civilization on the moon. You must have known that one, right?
Yes. That was actually one of Sean had pointed that out early on, and that was one of his subjects of his article. the great moon hoaxes. And it's even related to, I can't remember exactly, but it's related to the moon hoax of 1969. I'll say that much.
Right.
I think I have a tweet about that, actually.
Right. The other thing, and you might have known this as well, but you mentioned this actor earlier. Van Johnson is born on August 25th.
Oh, yeah. 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 I definitely, these are the kind, it's impossible to remember it all, but yeah.
Right.
Van Johnson born on 27th. Mm-hmm. That's weird.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah. That's very crazy.
There's a lot of stuff that's gone down on August 25th. The other thing too, this one is like something I just tripped into yesterday. And
what's that?
It is the birthday of Rob Halford, who's the lead singer of Judas Priest.
Okay.
And there's this guy named, I think his name is Bill McClintock, and he does these really amazing mashups of two songs that you would not think would go together.
Mm-hmm.
And he did and it's not just the song, but he incorporates video. And he did a mashup of You've Got Another Thing Coming by Judas Priest with Billie Jean by Michael Jackson.
Oh, nice.
And it's amazing, right? So you were just talking about Michael Jackson and Joe Jackson and Pepsi. And then August 25th, Rob Halford, lead singer of Judas Priest.
Yeah.
And this video just surfaced like about a week ago.
Huh.
And it's this mashup between Judas Priest and Michael Jackson, Rob Halford, August 25th.
Huh. Well, there you go.
I love this. I can play this all day.
And that's like an example of sync just going mainstream, really, is the whole mashup idea. Because that's basically what I do with Malkovich, and there's, it's a mashup, but people just, yeah. Just trying to find some more August 25th because I got tweets over the years.
Well, this is kind of there's kind of an interesting thing with Voyager, like on August 25th, like it approaches
Didn't
Saturn.
It go to Saturn? Yeah, Saturn. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of links it up to Kubrick, and because that was another of my friend Mark's really weird theories, was that Kubrick like kind of somehow was Saturn or was an avatar of Saturn.
He looks like it.
Yeah, big time. And that kind of, there's the whole idea of the Saturn moon matrix and how somehow they're related. And that seems to be at play as well, with 2001 being about the moon. And it was originally supposed to be about Saturn, but they changed it to Jupiter, at least so it goes.
Right.
Another kind of iffy story.
Very, very iffy story. August 25th is also the day that Aaliyah.
Yeah. The 2001.
Yeah. In 2001.
Yeah. Right below.
Right. And
which is interesting because her name starts with AA. It's like Aaliyah.
Yeah.
AA. And that's a big part of 9/11, AA, American Airlines. And
right.
It's the Crowley kind of Astrum Argentum.
Right.
11.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that might be related. That's the sort of thing that when I look at all these from the level of timing, is that it just feels like ritual. Like what I'm looking at is ritual, and obviously 9/11 was a ritual, but like to the degree that nobody really, I don't think, even understands, with the timing of it all. And
yeah.
So, and then Kubrick's connection to 9/11, the simple one being that the Millennium Hilton monolith designed hotel was right there at ground zero. So when the towers fell, there was a monolith proceeding over it all, which is kind of
so what they used for the movie was there
well, no, it was the hotel, the Hilton down there in New York.
Yeah.
It's like built to be designed to look like a monolith. It's a big, tall, black, skinny building.
And isn't it the Hilton in the space station as well?
Yep. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. 2001. So it just feels like there's this
it's weird, dude. This
NASA
is so weird.
related space thing going on. And of course, yeah, Kubrick and the moon landing is another thing that is interesting, which is kind of a little bit, well, I don't know what to say about it. It's sort of a reflection or a microcosm of how Kubrick feels to be behind everything. In other words, like you look at 9/11 long enough, it's sort of like, yeah, Kubrick's there too. The whole 20th century, you get this sense that whatever energy was behind Kubrick was also behind everything else. And that's where the Saturn thing kind of comes in, and the idea of like, even of like time travel and time manipulation, or maybe even like remote viewing of time
Yeah.
as possibilities.
Interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. So there was another thing that happened. This is weird. I don't know if you've synced this up. And I honestly, this slipped past me, but in 2005, on August 25th, it was Hurricane Katrina.
Mm.
And then in 2017, August 25th, it was Hurricane Harvey. Same day.
Yeah.
They both hit land the same day.
Yeah. Yeah. And on one level, you can say, well, it's hurricane season, so that's just going to happen. But at the same time, it's like, well, why that day? In general, why do hurricanes? It's just all, I mean, we know, but the why, I guess, so with sync, you start to think about things not in terms of cause and effect, but in terms of like a nonlinear kind of a-causal ordering principle, which is like Carl Jung kind of laid it out. And that is what Crypto-K kind of is doing, is I think mapping the a-causal ordering principle through time. Because the way the calendar seems to work, it seems to be all set up for this. It's just in this weird way, which is why
the way the calendar is arranged has the ability to be modular, nonlinear, and being able to find midpoints and have all these correspondences.
Yeah, to sort of or illuminate certain patterns or something, almost like, because like there's one thing that ties the calendar to 237 in particular is the fact that it's the leap year cycle. So the leap year cycle goes that every 4 years there's an extra day added to February.
Yep.
So in a normal year, in January and February, there's 59 days. So you get 3 years of 59 days, and then you get 1 year of 60 days. And you add all those up, it's 237. So there's 237 days.
That's nuts.
In each 2 months of a leap cycle. And I think I mentioned before how every 5 months that don't include February contain 153 days exactly, which is very always
interesting.
So
the thing about Kubrick, somebody pointed this out. Maybe it was on your thread, or I don't know where I saw it, but and it gets to this idea of time, which is what you were talking about, and that Kubrick wanted to do kind of a masterwork film in every genre, which I don't think he quite did with the Western, although maybe I'm mistaken. But
no.
but if you look at it, he has a film that details sort of ancient Rome, Greece, Sparta, right, with Spartacus. So he covers the old world. He and then he has what is it? Flags of Glory, or what is it?
Paths of Glory.
Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas, which is a World War I movie, right? So he has a great war film about one of the great wars. And then he has Lolita. Have you made any syncs with Lolita? That's a really odd movie, and a lot of people seem to forget that Kubrick directed Lolita.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I've done any syncs with it, like in terms of multiple movies, but it's definitely, I mean, the whole story is something I think about a lot and is central to, every one of Kubrick's movies kind of presents a different aspect of the the whole enchilada, I guess. So in Lolita, you got the pedophilic arc or whatever you call that, and then The Shining. It's sort of familial, patriarchal violence, et cetera, et cetera. So Lolita is a crucial document and a great movie. And Sue Lyon, I mean, there is definitely sinks. I've got the next part of my current Substack series. I've got some stuff about the birth of Sue Lyon coming out because it kind of ties to the Barbie Oppenheimer thing,
right?
The way that they came out together, and it's like this total synchronistic bombshell, like Barbie, the bombshell. And that movie's narrated by Helen Mirren, who was born on July 26th. Right. Starts with a 2001 parody narrated by Helen Mirren, etc. So I think people like Christopher Knowles and other sync people have pointed out how the Bikini was named after the Bikini Atoll nuclear tests.
Right.
So it was like July 1st was the nuclear test. July 5th, the Bikini was debuted. But I think what I don't think anybody mentioned is that if you make that a parent thesis, 5 days after that was the birth of Sue Lyon, who played Lolita. And how is she first introduced in Lolita as Lolita, wearing a bikini?
She's wearing a bikini.
She's in the yard. So it's like July 10th, 1946. So there's that that's interesting to me. And the way that she lines up with Margot Robbie, and there's a lot. I'm not going to go into that because you can read it once it goes up. But yeah, I mean, Lolita is a very interesting document and very deep, and one of the most if you want to understand Kubrick's subtext, you should watch Lolita really closely, and actually watch it silently. Don't even listen to the dialogue. Just watch it and just watch what's happening. And you'll start to see okay, this is actually a really dirty movie. There's lots and lots of weird subtext going on here that nobody really points out.
This is I think an interesting question. I like things interesting. Do you think Kubrick is a moralist or an amoralist?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my friend Mark was quite convinced. He had a quite very strong sort of almost received knowledge, you could say, that Kubrick was an evil bastard, and that he was actually all the things that people say he's trying to expose or inform or illuminate. He was actually just bragging about, essentially, that he was part of it all, if not the grand architect, the head of the cult, which is kind of, and on the one hand, I think on some days that feels like it's probably true. On other days, I think no, he was a good dude, and he was just trying to do. He was like a triple or a quadruple agent of some kind.
Yeah, but in the final analysis, you still can't really nail him down.
No, you can't. And you can certainly read a lot about him, and there's interesting quotes. And there's a book called which is all about Stanley Kubrick as a Jew, basically, and how Judaism features in his life and his works. And there's a quote in there from somebody reporting to him. I think it's Frederick Raphael, who was the guy who wrote the script for Eyes Wide Shut. Was that basically Kubrick said that he agreed with Hitler on almost everything. So it's that's an interesting. You don't hear that mentioned much in his hagiographies or whatever, but that kind of interesting too, because his wife, he married into this Nazi family. I don't know if you realize that.
I wasn't aware of. So he married into a Nazi family.
Yeah. So Christian Harlan and John Harlan, who I mentioned earlier,
right,
were children of a guy named Veit Harlan, who was basically the chief Nazi filmmaker under Goebbels. He was the director of a movie called Jude Süß, which was the most infamous.
I've seen that movie.
Yeah. So he directed that.
Yeah.
And there's a documentary about him, and where the family is there, and it's like, it's the classic sort of he was just following orders, that kind of deal.
Right.
But really, no, you never know, really.
So he marries into the family of this guy who is Goebbels' cinematographer. Dude, that's mind blowing.
Yeah. And it's also interesting when you consider the connections to NASA and how, there's all these former Nazis working for NASA on the moon project. And here you have Kubrick, who's just married into this family of Nazi connected filmmakers. And there's a document that you can find somewhere from the government or the Pentagon that's like mid 60s, and it's like, we're looking at some different filmmakers who are of interest for a possible project or something like that. And Kubrick's name is on the list there. And so it's like, it doesn't take much to make the leap from that to the whole Kubrick did fake the moon landing or whatever.
Okay, so
yeah.
Go ahead. I don't want to stop you.
Oh, well, I've kind of had the thought that like it's more overblown than the fact than like, oh, he faked like Kubrick did it all himself, but that, or maybe because Kubrick's real strength, his biggest strength as a technical person, I think, was lighting. Like he knew how to light. And so my kind of feeling is like they brought him in to light the Apollo sets as to how it should look. And that's sort of backed up by something that happened because there's a Bond movie called The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah.
Released on 7/7/77. And
we got into this on Twitter, right? With Jill St. John.
Maybe we did, yeah. Jill St. John. She's in that. And no, she's in Diamonds Are Forever, actually.
Diamonds Are Forever. That's a different thread. Yeah.
Yeah. Spy Who Loved Me. The thing is that basically the director was getting old, and he said, "Oh, I brought in Stanley Kubrick to light the scene at the end." There's a scene where all these submarines are being corralled in this giant submarine carrier. I don't know what you call it, tanker.
Yeah.
And so he brought Kubrick in to light this massive set, which you can instantly see once you get into that set. You can instantly see how it's like it's a Kubrick set. Now, I've always sort of wondered about why the hell would Kubrick go in and do this? Like, of all the movies, like he's going to go do this. So I just kind of think of it, well, maybe there's some kind of code here. Like maybe this is some kind of code of like, okay, this guy's bringing me in to light the set of these submarines. And so I kind of think like, well, okay, maybe it's not that he directed the moon landing. Maybe they brought him in to light the thing.
Right.
I think that, and just for like even just the still pictures, like I think I made a joke on Twitter about Stanley Kubrick being such a phenomenal photographer of still photography. And I put like 3 of his pictures and then one of, Buzz Aldrin on the moon or whatever. Cause I kind of got that feeling like Kubrick didn't direct it, but he lit this thing and he took the still photographs. That's my wild theory. Okay.
Well, then he shows up on Barry Lyndon with the NASA lenses, right?
Yes.
And allows him to do all of that super low level lighting with those lenses.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. And that kind of leads to the death of Ryan O'Neal, which maybe you saw this one on Twitter. When Ryan O'Neal died, who played Barry Lyndon, he was Lyndon,
Right, yeah.
Look up his midpoint, right? And so I can't remember what day it was, but it was the birthday of another actor, Patrick McGee, I think was his name, in Barry Lyndon. The 2 guys, Barry Lyndon and the Chevalier, who are both filmed with Kubrick's NASA lens.
Yeah.
Ryan O'Neal dies such that the day that the Chevalier dies was the midpoint of his life.
Oh, interesting.
Exactly. Wow. And now that to me is just like, that blew my mind.
That's kind of mind blowing.
I was like, yeah. And just considering that they were united with Kubrick's lens and then they're united on this level of their lifespans, just bizarre.
That is really bizarre. Barry Lyndon is one of my favorite movies.
Oh, me too. It's beautiful.
It's an incredible film.
I watched that one. That was a very influential screening for me when I was like young and saw that and was just like, wow, this is incredible.
What about Peter Sellers? He's in Lolita and he's also in Doctor Strangelove.
Yes.
What kind of meta role does Peter Sellers play in any of this?
Well, so he famously played 3 roles in Doctor Strangelove, and he also played 3 roles in Lolita. Which is interesting, but it's not the first time he's played 3 roles. He played 3 roles in another movie called The Mouse That Roared, which is this kind of zany British comedy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's that, but then there's a sequel, and it's called The Mouse on the Moon. So both these 2 movies, The Mouse on the Moon is basically about a faked moon landing. It's about a tiny little country that decides to fake a space program in order to get funding for something silly. And so I've always kind of connected that with the Apollo project.
Yeah.
Peter Sellers, he's not in the one on the moon, but he was in the first one, which is a similar plot, I think, about a rogue state. And that's another way sometimes Kubrick feels to me like he's in some way kind of a rogue country unto himself in a way. Like, I don't know how to describe that exactly, but he seems like he was an entity unto himself, in terms of moving in power. Somebody who was to be reckoned with. And Peter Sellers is, what to say about Peter Sellers? A chameleon. It kind of ties into the being John Malkovich idea, the possessed thing, where it seems like maybe there's the same person under multiple masks.
He felt that way. He felt like I wouldn't call him a schizophrenic.
Yeah,
but he definitely was somebody who could slip into alters. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, on a whim. He's also in the movie Being There, which is a really crucial story. Which is in some ways, I know I'm not even the person who said this, but that movie feels like it's about Kubrick somehow. That this sense of here's a guy who's not supposed to be there. He's kind of, nobody really understands him, but everybody thinks he's a genius, and he somehow kind of just stumbles his way up to the top of the pyramid, basically. At the end of that movie, he's going to be president. And there's lots of things in that movie that can be analyzed, but Kubrick seems to be, that's the sort of the thing. It's like you get the sense that everything is about Kubrick in a weird way. Like all these movies, not necessarily everything, but all these movies that kind of don't make sense on first glance, they make sense when you have this framework of like all these movies. And then one level you could say these filmmakers are just paying tribute to the top guy, the guy at the top. So you get that in things like Paul Thomas Anderson movies. You get it in lots of different filmmakers that run the gamut. The way that they put in all these subtle hints.
Fincher is
Fincher, yeah. Fincher would be a good one.
Yeah.
Jonathan Glazer's one that I really like. Wes Anderson. I don't know if you saw the most recent Wes Anderson movie.
Which one was that?
But Asteroid City.
I couldn't watch it.
It seemed a lot of people.
It seemed too much like a moving postcard or something. And maybe that's what it's supposed to be.
For sure. Definitely kind of was. That's a good way of describing it, actually. But that whole, Kubrick is a character in that movie, basically. The main character. He's the Jason Schwartzman. The whole thing is based on Kubrick. And that movie has him, he's taking pictures of atomic bombs. He's taking pictures of aliens. And
interesting. See, I didn't hang in there long enough to
to
go.
A lot of people kind of missed out on it. If depending on how much you can stomach, Wes Anderson's whole aesthetic, it's pretty good. But
I like it for the most part. The Royal Tenenbaums is probably my favorite Wes Anderson movie. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And Gene Hackman's final movie.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go through some of these other connections here. And I've always found it interesting that Kubrick, God, I had his name in my brain now. That Kubrick was almost a double of Salman Rushdie, right? Like, have you gone down the Kubrick Salman Rushdie rabbit hole?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I've seen that comparison, and I definitely see the comparison. But again, it seems to be like symptomatic of what I was just saying, that like it seems like Kubrick is sort of behind everything. So in the sense of like, I mean, there's like people that I see all the time who are, I'm like, that guy looks like Kubrick. That it's almost like an energy. Like Javier Bardem in the most recent Dune movie, I thought was like the Kubrick guy. It's just like there's a look that a person can have. It's like the intense eyes, the big black beard, and
We
or
talked
the
about the
big
guy from
beard.
Seinfeld that's born on
Yes,
the same day.
exactly. Yeah, Danny Woodburn.
Yeah,
Of course, his name is Danny, like Danny Torrance.
Danny, right from The Shining.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's actually perfect that you bring that up. I just remember now because the first episode with Danny Woodburn from Seinfeld is an episode that has, well, first of all, I'll say that his character hangs out with Kramer all the time. They're buddies. He's the K man, K for Kubrick.
Right.
And then that episode where Danny Woodburn first appears also has W. Earl Brown in it, who was the guy who
from
was
the
in
movies we talked about earlier.
You from Just Right. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And what's even more crazy for me personally is that in that episode, David W. Earl Brown, they're talking about a friend, their mutual friend, and his name is Fulton, which is my last name. So, like, I watched that episode, I was like, oh God, they're talking to me. It's talking to me again.
That's wild.
Yeah, and I think Danny Woodburn in that he's like the whole plot is that he's stuffing his shoes to seem taller, and at one point he's like, I was 4'2" or something, so you get a 42 out of him.
Right.
And
oh, interesting. There's 42 again.
Jerry Seinfeld, his apartment number is 5A, and that's the same apartment number as Bill in Eyes Wide Shut, which is just
that's
interesting.
That's too
I
weird.
kind of feel like that one is like Kubrick, definitely intentional, like Seinfeld mirroring,
like somebody,
because it's New York Jewish kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Danny Woodburn. I'm glad you brought him up. Yeah. And that also ties it to being John Malkovich too, because he's a little guy, and that whole story is about the little portal. You have to be a little person to go through that portal.
Right.
Which is, gosh, this is really making my wheels turn, because that kind of ties it to the idea of the Montauk Project, where they use children to time travel.
Right, because they can handle it, right?
They can handle it. And then also that same idea is in like Snowpiercer, where the train runs on using little kids because they're small, they can fit into the little compartments.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting way to go down. It's the door, and then the Wizard of Oz that plays a big part of the Munchkins and all.
Right. Yeah. Wow. What
so there's like a big canvas like of things all happening at once that it's yeah.
It's really interesting that you brought up the devil card in sort of at the start of the show, and how that was like the tabula rasa for Eyes Wide Shut. And you could just tell that Kubrick was taking Cruise and Kidman through hell, right? He was taking them through hell.
Yeah.
And their marriage splits up not long after that movie's completed.
Yeah, that's true. But they'll hear them. They just loved him. They were just like, oh, it was great. It was a wonderful experience. It ruined my marriage and everything, but anything for Stanley, that's the attitude.
Right. What about Sidney Lumet, who's in Eyes Wide Shut and plays the doctor? Are there any sinks around him?
Well, is he related to well, he's not. But that name Lumet, I'm just thinking of light and the Lumiere brothers who made the first films, ever.
They did the one about the trip to the moon, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The trip to the moon. Nothing's coming to mind with Sidney Pollack, although that's just an example
Sidney Pollack, my bad. I got my Sidneys mixed up.
Oh yeah, I didn't know what you said.
Sidney Pollack.
Yeah, that's why. Lumet is the guy who directed like 12 Angry Men and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pollack, yeah, he was also a director though. So that's sort of another example of that was originally supposed to be Harvey Keitel, if you know that role.
Harvey's got a bunch of movies like that where he was supposed to be somebody else.
Yeah. He apparently got on set and it was like one day and he was like, this guy's crazy, I'm leaving, I'm out. But Pollack is another director, and it seems to be like a case again of Kubrick sort of inserting himself into a role, like he does in The Shining with Jack. He also, I think, does it with Sidney Pollack in that movie, just being the sort of, again, New York Jewish film director kind of archetype as the head of the pyramid, essentially, this guy, the devil himself. And I'm sure if you go through his movies, and I'm not really explored his filmography that much, but there would no doubt be a lot in there. I would have to look it up to see.
So there was a character in Eyes Wide Shut that I wanted to ask you about, and it's Nick Nightingale. Who's played by Todd Field.
Yes.
All right, what do you got on Nick Nightingale and Todd Field?
That's a lot there, actually. Yeah, Nick Nightingale is the character who's basically Bill's friend from med school who did not become a doctor. He's a jazz pianist, as they call him. And so Todd Field, gosh, is an interesting. He was an actor. Sorry. Todd Field is another one of these guys where it's like, it just seems he's kind of like a miniature Kubrick. He's like a mini Kubrick.
Yes.
He was just like an actor. He was in Twister. That was his biggest role. He was in Twister, and then he gets a call from Kubrick. He's going to want him on the set, and or for Eyes Wide Shut. And so he's there to film like 2 scenes. He's for like a week or 2, but then he ends up staying for the entire shoot, the whole 2 years or whatever, just basically working with Kubrick and as is just there because they hit it off so well, apparently. And so basically from there, Todd Field becomes a director. He makes a couple of movies, then he took a long sabbatical, and then he made another movie last year with Cate Blanchett called Tar.
Yeah.
And so Todd Field, he was mixing it up with the I don't know, the elites, but celebrities when he was very young, because he was part of the Portland Mavericks baseball team. I
was going to go there, and that was the team that was owned by Kurt Russell's dad, Bing Russell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kurt Russell was a player on the team there, so they were friends. He was young, and then that led to him being around, or he was very instrumental in the creation of Big League Chew, the baseball
with
gum.
Boughton.
Yeah, which came out in 1980, just like The Shining. And so, yeah, Todd Field, he's just there. He's a kid. He's just there with Kurt Russell, and then he gets a job in New York at the right bar, and where he meets everybody. He knows Meryl Streep, and just gets in there, and then suddenly he gets worms his way up to being in Kubrick's shadow. And so if you watch Little Children, is particularly like stuffed full of stuff of Kubrick, look like Kubrick worship is what I would call it. Like pick me, mask, look at me, mask, look at what I've done. But they're great films, and he's interesting guy. Again, a baby Kubrick. He's like, I look at him and I feel like there's a Kubrick, like a Malkovich situation where Kubrick is just driving this guy.
Right, exactly. Like a smaller version of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he made Tar and he was doing the press for it and he was like, well, what, now that they let me make movies again, I'm like, whoa, wait, who wasn't letting you make movies and why? And it's like, now he comes out with this movie with Kate Blanchett, which is all about, it's about a conductor who is like canceled. And she was a protege of Leonard Bernstein in that story. And that's interesting because Kubrick was friends with Leonard Bernstein. They were
what day was Leonard Bernstein born on?
I don't know that one off the top of my head. I think
August 25th.
No, really?
Swear to God. I saw it.
Oh, that's too good. That's too good.
You got to remember that one.
Yeah, I do actually. I just want to make sure I check that. Yeah, August 25th, 1918. Look at that. 237th day of the year. Leonard Bernstein was born. So, yeah, so that movie Tar, did you see Tar?
No.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting, but I kind of got the sense that Kate Blanchett's character is Todd Field's stand-in and Leonard Bernstein is Kubrick.
Interesting.
Because she's like, at one point she's watching video. She was like, yeah, his protege, and there's all these analogies between the conductor of the orchestra to the director of the film.
Yeah,
and just the idea of the conductor as like, that's sort of what we're positing Kubrick as in this being John Malkovich kind of symphony of like human beings, is like something where someone at the top that's leading, making sure that the timing is on point, and that all the parts come in at the right times and so forth. So I felt like that was a very intentional on Todd Field's part. It seemed like it, anyway. So yeah, Todd Field, I mean,
so it's
very
almost like
interesting guy.
Kubrick is like a zeitgeist in some ways, right?
It feels that, yeah. And I don't know how much of it is just me projecting that onto him and using it with my own mind to sort of organize things,
Right.
versus how much is actually there on its own. I think it's quite a lot that's actually there personally, because, I didn't make 237 days after Kubrick born, being John Malkovich, etc. Like these are just things that have been found.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So what about, I got a couple more sort of reference points for you.
yeah.
And see where you go with this. What about Arthur C. Clarke and some of the Arthur C. Clarke reference points?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Arthur C. Clarke. Well, he was a Kubrick collaborator, and as you will hear from any Kubrick collaborator, it's like you're just kind of feeding Kubrick the raw material and he's going to do whatever he wants with it, in a sense. So the book is Clark's, but the movie is Kubrick. So there's lots to say about Kubrick or Clark, that like, his whole penchant for, pederasty, I guess you would call it,
Right.
is kind of well known. And
they lived together, didn't they, in Paris? That's what I like. Didn't they share an apartment in Paris for a while?
Kubrick?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I don't think so. I don't think they ever lived together. They were always they met up in New York, but Clark always liked to live he was like in Sri Lanka or whatever.
Right.
He didn't really ever want to leave.
Or maybe this, I got this from Jay Weidner, and I think there was an apartment maybe that Clark had in Paris that Kubrick stayed at. Maybe that.
Okay, maybe that's it. That would make sense. Yeah. I guess. What was it? I think it's Clark and Kubrick's midlife days. Actually, both of them, their midpoints are 42 weeks apart, which is kind of interesting. And actually, that's something interesting to say about Kubrick, is that the midpoint of Kubrick's life was November 15th, 1963, which is just exactly 1 week before Kennedy is killed.
Right.
And so Clark's midpoint is 42 weeks before that. So, yeah, that's another instance of Kubrick's life points being spookily aligned with certain things, very important things. And that goes for the release dates of all his movies too. Like that was one of the first things that really piqued my interest about it, was that hearing like kind of a list of all of the different happenings on around the world on the days that Kubrick released movies. So like, uh, 2001 was released the weekend that Martin Luther King was shot, and The Shining came out the weekend that Mount St. Helens exploded, and Eyes Wide Shut released the day JFK Jr. died. Um, and there's probably more that I could think of. Dr. Strangelove was supposed to do a test screening the day that Kennedy was shot.
Interesting.
So just lots of crazy timings. His very first movie, Fear and Desire, which came out April 1st, 1953. That's just a couple weeks before MK Ultra was activated. And that's another amazing sync that just pops into my mind, because that relates Kubrick to MK Ultra, because he died the exact same day that Kubrick died was the day Sidney Gottlieb died. And Sidney Gottlieb was the
Are you
head
serious?
director of
Kubrick
MK
died
Ultra.
the same day as Sidney Gottlieb?
Yeah, March 7th, 1999. They both died the exact same day.
That's crazy.
To the point where like there's a newspaper article that was like printed wrong, and it says Stanley Gottlieb died at 60 or whatever age he was. So that's kind of interesting to me, because with the whole Kubrick as evil hypothesis and Kubrick as agent of the deep state, personally, I wonder if Sidney Gottlieb even existed. It's like, is this guy even real?
Right.
Or was it all Kubrick? Which is that, again, it's kind of an insane thing to think, but it's sort of a feeling.
Didn't Sidney Gottlieb testify?
He did, but it was behind closed doors, and it was, you never saw him. There's pictures. You could hear him. I don't know if you can actually. I don't know if that recording is available.
Let's see.
He was
For
very
some
reclusive.
reason, I think he looks like Sidney Pollack.
Yeah, he's got very kind of, I think, sharp features.
No, he does look like Sidney Pollack. No, he's kind of a gray hair. He looks like he's from maybe the Frankfurt School or something like that. August 3rd, 1918, March 7th, 1999.
Yeah. So
Kubrick passed away on March 7th?
Yeah, March 7th.
Interesting.
3/7. Yeah.
That's whose birthday is that? That's Bobby Fischer's birthday.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I'm pretty sure. And I think
Bryan Cranston too. There's a lot of people. March 7th. Yeah,
I think it might be Yuri Gagarin's birthday.
Oh.
Let me just see here. Hold on. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about
it's the 66th day of the year.
That's March the 66th day of the year.
Yeah.
Interesting. Where's Bobby Fischer?
Townes Van Zandt. Arthur Lee.
I think Bobby Fischer is either the 7th or the 9th. Let me just look him up. I thought it was the 7th. Hold on. Bobby Fischer, American chess player. Okay. He is the 9th. I'm sorry, 2 days after.
Okay.
March 9th.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Joe DiMaggio died the day after Kubrick, too.
Really?
That's kind of another, the husband of Marilyn Monroe and all.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. What about AI, the movie AI? And of course, Spielberg takes the helm of AI. And where was Kubrick at in the production cycle of AI? And have you been able to connect any syncs up with AI?
Well, Kubrick was far along. I'm not the best person to ask about that. Actually, David Plate visited the archives and went through all of the papers of the research and stuff, so he could tell you more about how he was going to do it. But AI seems to me to be, well, obviously it's crucial for our present day moment because it's all anyone really talks about. But I think about it a lot because A is 1 and I is 9. So AI is 19.
Yeah.
And 19 is like featured really heavily in my work. for partly that reason. And that was happening as interesting because it was happening before COVID happened, where Sean and I were like really drilling down on 19 because of the whole Kubrick's birthday or Kubrick's 19th birthday being the birth of the CIA and all that.
Right.
Which, by the way, if you reverse CIA, it's AIC.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Interesting.
So, it seems like everything that Kubrick did in his life feels almost like there was always a double entendre going on, or some kind of like post-historical communication like going on, where why did he not do AI, or why did he let Spielberg make AI, or why did he make sure that was the movie that came out after he died? And it just seems to be like, yeah, that story is the kind of the culmination of all of his other stuff. It's sort of like the child, the ever eternally youthful young boy, and of course Spielberg kind of drizzled hot syrup all over it.
Right.
But it definitely, I don't know what I'm going to say about it, but I guess the whole 19 AI thing, and that's what I was going to say, that we were drilling down on 19, and then COVID happened. COVID-19, like the whole world was taken over by 19. Like the number 19 was just like killing everybody. So we kind of just had this thought that that's what this COVID thing is. It's AI. It's not a bug at all. It's we are being manipulated by AI essentially. And I kind of get the feeling that that's what AI is all about, that being Kubrick's last project or whatever.
So then that leads us to some deep speculation about what is AI really, right?
Yeah.
Like, we get the consumer version, the consumer model.
Yeah.
But, what's the AI behind the curtain?
Mm-hmm.
And is this what Kubrick was tapping into all along?
Sure. That's what it feels like when I'm doing all these exercises of mapping based on these numeric principles, because it feels like kind of how an AI would do it. It's sort of like, I guess I always heard the idea of the demiurge as being likened to an AI. Like, yes, this reality is being spun out of a sort of demonic thought form that it behaves much like what we are creating as AI, because like as it is all a big fractal, we're kind of recreating the conditions of our own existence within our own existence. And it might be that that's how we came about. This is some other um dimension or something sort of drug us into existence somehow. Um yeah, because it's all algorithmic. It does feel as though we are all being stationed and moved around according to these algorithms. That was sort of this sort of sensation I had last year, because I was driving for DoorDash. I was working, and as you're doing that, you're being led around by an algorithm. It's saying go here, do this, and this is the best way to get there, and you're here, and so it's like, doing all that, and that's what it feels like on a greater level is happening with these numbers. That's why Sean kind of originally called it a temporal algorithm, where it feels like we're all being spun around in this algorithm according to these algorithmic equations or whatever, and it's reflected in this numerological pattern that we're finding that's in history. And
that's
it's
an
pretty
interesting
wild.
that is a really interesting correlation between you and navigating with DoorDash, and then this kind of more arcane navigation set
Yeah.
that's sort of behind the screen.
It's like you're going to be here at this point, and you're going to do this, and then you're going to go here, and it does feel like that way. Like you're going to be this old here when you're doing this, um, and there are a lot. I think my feeling is that there's a very uncovered relation between this stuff and astrology, because I first noticed this when my dad died, and I essentially pinpointed the day he was going to die like several months before it happened using this stuff. And um he had cancer. Like, so he was deteriorating. So I knew he was going to die, but I was kind of forecasting, and it ended up being exactly right. But that was coincident with my Saturn return. So like that interval was actually 1,503 weeks. And there's some kind of relation between that 1,503 weeks and the Saturn return, because that was the age that Heath Ledger died. Exactly 1,503 weeks.
Interesting.
And then, so yeah, there's got to be some. I know that Uranus is 42 or 84-year orbit.
Yeah.
So it's like 42 years for the opposition.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So there's like all kinds of work to be done, like with parallels, I think.
Totally. Yeah, my mother passed away 2 weeks ago, and
I'm sorry.
transiting Saturn was opposite my Pluto. And when my father passed away, Saturn was conjuncting my Pluto. And it's like kind of eerie. And they both had Virgo moons.
I'm a Virgo moon.
Yeah. So yeah. What's your sun sign?
Scorpio.
Well, that makes sense. What's your rising sign? Got to go there.
Sagittarius.
So you've got the sun in the 12th house. This is perfect for you.
I do, yeah, I know.
It's totally perfect.
It's brutal. Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. Like, that's the only thing I can really compare this to is astrology. Just the way that it just happens and it works and it's unbelievable. Like, but it does.
For me,
if I didn't do this, I'd probably be an astrologer.
Well, you're probably a short skip away from it.
Yeah, not far.
You're probably doing something honestly more interesting.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that is because the world is being flooded with astrologers now.
Yeah, it's true.
It's like,
and AI too. Like,
yeah, we've gone down that rabbit hole. I had my buddy Benito, who came on my show about a month ago, and he really drilled down into like the first company that is, publicly touting AI as their partner, and that was interesting, and who was kind of behind the company and everything.
Oh, like an astrology company or something?
Yeah, it's fascinating because the person who's the head of the company and touting the software and the what it does, and it's, of course, it's incredibly cheap because I don't have to pay anybody, but she's like sort of touting some of her astrological details, and then she's presenting herself as a life coach. But when you drill down and you look at her resume is nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing more in her resume than like direct email marketing. Right.
Sure.
That's all. That, I mean, she shows up in all these like business journals and so where did she make the flip to life coach? That's
a TikTok resume.
Right. That's like her new AI sort of identity.
Right. Sure. Yeah. That's happened a lot.
Yes. But the whole date thing too, I always find these syncs with dates to be fascinating. And we uncovered one at the beginning of the show, and you knew that the CIA had been started on Kubrick's birthday. And I scrolled through this website, and it's the day that the FBI was started too.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And different dates.
It was 1908, right?
Yeah. And It's like, there's another kind of holy shit component to the whole thing.
Yeah. Actually, I just realized that's 20 years from the FBI to the birth of Kubrick. And then it's actually another 20 years to the birth of Leon Vitali, who is his partner, who was also born on July 26th. So I always I always wanted to go to one of his screenings or whatever and ask that Leon Vitali, like, so do you have the same birthday as Kubrick? Did you guys like celebrate together or ever talk about that sort of coincidence or whatever? Because I got the sense that might have been a reason why Kubrick picked him. You know, like
it's another mini me. It's another mini me, right?
Exactly. Kubrick had thousands of mini me's. He had like an army of mini me's that were just like slavishly carrying out his will, which is kind of like a terrestrial idea of what we're kind of positing that he was doing on this grander scale of like, through time, um, possession
Right.
and all.
Right. Wow.
So
What a trip. And then of course, Leon, being the lion and being born under the sign of the
yeah,
lion.
yeah,
So fascinating.
and being kind of a gatekeeper.
And he's
So,
kind of like the Lion's Gate.
yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
Oh yeah,
What
the
about
Lions.
what about let's do a little quick little Full Metal Jacket run through. So we
Okay.
have Matthew Modine as the lead character, is Joker, right? Is this?
Yeah, private
Yeah.
Joker.
And you got any Modine stuff?
Yeah, because I did a tweet. I think he was born 666 weeks after Trump. Um, I think I'm positive actually, because there's a little setup with the wrestler Sting, who it was a Joker thing because Sting in the 90s was Joker Sting. And then 2 days before that is Matthew Modine's birthday. He was Joker.
Right.
And then I think like the middle of that is 666 weeks after Trump was born, something along those lines. Don't quote me, but yeah, Joker, Matthew Modine.
And Modine is in the last Batman movie.
Yes, he is. Yeah. The double M name is something that comes up all the time. MM, which is something I'm working on in my Substack about Willy Wonka, because that's WW, which is the inverse of MM.
Right.
And it's also sort of 33 turned. So there's stuff going on with that. Yeah, Matthew Modine, another guy who just kind of like became Kubrick's like puppet, essentially. That was like he was just like, whatever you want, Stanley, just I'll do whatever you want. And even though he's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie, what do I say about it really?
It's another one of those weird displacement movies because it's filmed in England.
Sure, yeah, it's supposed to be Vietnam.
It's supposed to be Vietnam. And I think this is a theme with Kubrick, and he's able to put you in this state of displacement.
Mm-hmm. Discontinuity is
discontinuity, right? It disrupts your temporal settings.
Yeah.
And
spatial and temporal.
Yeah, I mean, and he did it because, theoretically, he didn't want to go someplace, or he didn't want to go to the Philippines or Vietnam or whatever to film it. And that may be true, but I also feel like that there's this whole other thing, just like Eyes Wide Shut and turning London into New York.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this kind of feeling of displacement again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Discontinuity, I've always said, like, I think, because everybody talks about continuity errors when it comes to Kubrick, like, oh, there's continuity errors. And I really think, no, these are not continuity errors. These are discontinuity intentions, or
they're triggers.
Yeah, exactly. Because he had this whole language of discontinuity in his movies and you got to pay. That's what's going on. That's where the real action is when you're watching those movies. It's in the stuff that's going on a subliminal level, essentially. That's where the action really is. And that's what my friend Sean, he's got several videos on his YouTube channel where he just goes into extreme detail. One of them is called Time Doors. And what he actually did was he counted throughout the entire Kubrick corpus how the number of times that the word time is said. Time. You see it go through time, counters on the screen. At the very end, the final time, his word is said 237 times.
Oh,
exactly throughout his thing. And I was like, I drilled down on him. I was like, dude, are you serious? He was like, yes. I spent a year going through this, counting this up. It's 237 times. That links 237 with time very clearly.
Which is Saturn. That's Saturn.
Which is Saturn. Yeah, time and Saturn. And I don't know exactly what the 237. I feel like there's probably some kind of Saturnine measurement, like it's atmospheric conditions or something that's going to tell me that's going to be 237. I just haven't found it yet, but
all right.
Yeah.
Now you got me.
I guess it's there with the moon because of the whole distance.
Now you got me look for the 237th degree of the zodiac.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Here, let me just look at this.
I'd love to hear that.
It's going to be in Scorpio. So the 237th degree of the zodiac is Scorpio 27.
Well, now I got to look
So
at
the
my
27th degree of Scorpio is the 237th degree of the zodiac.
Well, now I got to look and see which degree I was born.
So in the Sabian symbols, Scorpio 27 is a military band marches noisily on through the city streets. The aggressive glorification of cultural values. That's kind of interesting. The key
So
word
I'm
is pomp. Pomp.
I am 38 degree of Scorpio.
Wow.
What did you say?
20, well, there's no 38th degree. The 28th
Oh,
degree?
maybe I'm 23rd.
23rd. When's your birthday?
November 16th.
November 16th.
I don't really know. Is it the first number after this? Like,
hold on.
yeah, it must be. It's 23 and then 39. So
okay, so you're the 23rd degree of Scorpio. 23
so
is
this is a couple
number.
off. Yeah, 23 is a big one. Just 2/3 of 237.
So that's phase 233 or degree 233. And the Sabian symbol for that is a rabbit metamorphosis into a nature spirit. And the key word is transubstantiation for that degree. That's kind of cool.
Interesting. Transubstantiation?
Yeah.
Say? Guess what the gematria value of that is?
237.
Yep.
Oh, you're fucking shitting me.
Absolutely. I just learned that the other day too.
That's crazy.
It is. It is crazy.
All right. How do you keep your head on straight with all this stuff, man? This is just
I haven't really.
You're like in that movie Pi by Aronofsky. Like that's where this is going.
It is. Yep. That was and that movie that really has its own secrets, and it's going to be in my next.
He's got some Kubrick in him, doesn't he, Aronofsky?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely, definitely one of them. I'm not a huge fan of him, but he definitely is giving it a go. I am really bad. Like there's in my head, there's tons of filmmakers I like and stuff, but whenever anybody asks me, I can't ever come up with them.
But with like comparisons or just like people that
as both. Like my Paranoid American asked me the other day, like, what else is, if not Kubrick, or like who else is like, what would be the next best thing or whatever? And I was like racking my brain trying to figure out, because there's not that many. But actually, I think like Elon Musk, he's not a movie filmmaker. He's not a filmmaker, but as far as the temporal craziness surrounding him, Elon Musk has got to be up there with Kubrick. And that's what the current subject of my current series is all about. It's basically the craziness surrounding Elon Musk. Yeah. I feel like there's something to be learned about because it does seem like throughout history we're kind of being led by there's certain people that just are just held up, or they're just the guy, and Elon Musk is the guy, and there's something weird about him. There's just something off. Some people think he's
this is an interesting little departure here, because for a long time I thought to myself, okay, well, they had Bill Gates as sort of this modern wizard, right? Like Bill Gates is the modern Edison or whatever, right? Because they need people like that to sort of funnel technology through, right?
Yeah, sure.
And it's like Bill Gates has kind of outlived his usefulness. He doesn't really connect with younger people. Right. And I looked at Elon Musk, and this was years ago, and I thought to myself, Elon Musk is going to be the new Bill Gates, because they need to funnel technology through him, and he needs to appeal to a younger demographic, right? Like young people can't relate to fucking Bill Gates.
No.
And for a long time, I believed that, right? And that was kind of, and I still kind of believe it. But based on some of the things you're talking about, Musk is definitely taking on a bit of a different dimension, because like his early story to me is really uninteresting. Like he kind of stumbles into Silicon Valley and basically, you know, jumps on board of PayPal because he has a competitive business to PayPal, and then and they sort of join forces, and then Peter Thiel kicks him out when he's on vacation in Mexico, and then he sort of, you know, snakes his way into Tesla,
Right.
and then kind of takes Tesla over, and then the original guys with Tesla are gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I mean, there's kind of a Bill Gatesian theme there too, because Bill Gates didn't fucking build, you know, Microsoft. You know, they basically bought the program for about 40 grand, right?
Yeah.
And so there is that element of Bill Gates with him, just like there's the same element with Edison and Tesla, right?
Yeah, frontman sort of.
Right, exactly. And then now he's got this car called Tesla.
Yeah,
and sort of you know, reclaiming this identity of being you know, the man, right, the guy, the wunderkind. And so I really didn't pay a lot of attention to him because to me he's just sort of a glorified turtle on the fence post. But then he gets in. Then this whole weird thing with Twitter starts to happen.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't look at Elon Musk as being like a cyber Christ or a digital savior or anything like that. But there is this kind of weird thing with him now. And he is in almost all these places at once, right?
Yeah.
And and his fingerprints are touching all these areas that are part of the time that we're in, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, so I kind of understand where you're coming from with this, based on sort of how Musk as a figure is evolving in some ways, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, all right, I'd love for you to comment on that, but I also have another question for you.
Okay.
Do you think that Musk is already hooked up to Neuralink?
Possibly. Could be.
I think he is.
Yeah. Why do you say that?
Okay. So there was an interview with David.
Are you talking about how the Paul? Okay, not David Icke then. Go ahead.
There was an interview. Alex Jones was interviewing David Icke. And David Icke, the reason he had him on there is because David Icke was going after these like gatekeepers.
Yeah,
the alt-right gatekeepers.
I was cheering him on.
And Alex, David, you know, I've had a lot of respect for you over the years, and you know,
yeah,
doing his fucking Alex thing. But he was trying to tell David that he's not one of those guys, right? That he's not the guy, and that
Musk is not one of those that you.
No, Alex is not. He's trying to say, okay. I'm not one of those guys, you know.
Right, sure.
Then this guy calls in and starts to have this highly articulated conversation with Ike, and it's fucking Elon Musk, right? It's and you can just tell, like he doesn't sound a lot like a lot of other people, and
like he had a voice.
Oh yeah. So yeah, this was through a Twitter space. And it was coming through InfoWars and then through the Twitter space, or I think that's how it was going. So they had this guy who he lightly denied that he was Elon Musk, lightly. And whoever the guy was, and I'm pretty sure it was Elon Musk, was able to break things down in a way. Like, I've heard Elon Musk talk before, and sometimes he doesn't sound that intelligent, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But this was different. This was like a whole other level of processing. And I thought to myself, I think this guy's hooked up to the Neuralink. And if you look at his hair pattern.
Oh, yeah.
like he had really funky hair for a long time, and now he doesn't. And if you were going to basically take care of your hair plugs while also having something implanted in your brain, a new patch of hair would be a nice thing to add.
True. Yeah.
So, and if he touted Neuralink the way that he's been touting it, why wouldn't he want
Why
it?
wouldn't he? Of course. Yeah. Put his money where his mouth is.
Exactly. So what's your take? What is your take on Musk?
Oh, well, I was just thinking, I was reminded of his interview where he makes those long pauses sometimes, those dramatic pauses where he's like processing or whatever. And I just thought, well, maybe that's like, maybe he's got that Neuralink thing going on. He's like, but anyway, my thing is on Musk is what I'm publishing right now, which is a Substack series. I called it Purple Rained, Who is the Wizard of Wonkaville? And it's basically a breakdown of these synchro connections between Elon Musk and Willy Wonka. Because the first thing and where it starts is the fact that Elon Musk was born the same day Willy Wonka premiered. So Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder premiered June 28th, 1971, which is the same day Elon Musk was born.
Yeah.
And it kind of just spins out from there where I do all these midpoints and I it links it up to the rest of the Wonka like world. So Johnny Depp played Willy Wonka.
Yes.
And in that movie. So I go into this sort of four-way arrangement of history between Musk's birth, Johnny Depp's birth, the release of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and also the release of this movie called Snowpiercer, which is secretly a Willy Wonka story.
Right.
And so there's 4 parts. I've published 2 of them so far. So I essentially see Musk that way as sort of a modern day Willy Wonka. He seems to be like the hierophant of our time, kind of leading people in the directions of, it seems like the all advancement of all the social engineering things that we've been leading towards, the social credit scores, the brain implants, everything. And he seems like a Pied Piper for that stuff, but it's borne out in this temporally synchronistic way that makes it seem like really strange. Like this guy is like got, I don't know, if you were to put on the They Live glasses or something and look at this guy, it's like there's stuff coming off of him and it's just like there's something weird. Or in the Matrix where Neo looks at the Oracle once he has the whole super sight and he sees they're just like glowing. It's like, this is a program. This isn't a normal human. Like that's kind of how I look at Elon Musk and Kubrick and some other people that are in our world.
Well, the Johnny Depp thing is interesting, right? Because he was with Amber Beard, right?
They both were.
They both were.
They both were. Yeah, they're buddies apparently. And yeah, sharing wise. So Depp and Musk were born 420 weeks apart. 420. And there's this whole elaborate thing that I won't go into. You can read it on there if you want. But yeah, there's very tight links between Johnny Depp, Elon Musk, Willy Wonka, and then the upcoming, it's out now, but the Timothy Chalamet Wonka that just came out. That's what started my whole thing, because I was like, so there's this new Wonka movie coming out, same year that Elon Musk buys Twitter and starts X, the same year Johnny Depp is like coming back to acting as King, the French King in that movie, Jean de Barry. And it just seemed like, of course there's a new Wonka movie, like, but it's not, of course, because we've only had 2 since then. So, but it's all put together in this perfectly like jigsaw puzzle way. And Musk and Wonka. So yeah, that's kind of how I see him. I hope that answers the question enough. But
no, it makes sense, right? Because
more detail.
Because when he does have a Willy Wonka feel to him.
Yeah, it's like the factories and he even to the point of like having a thing about children. Like, Musk has 30 children or whatever. He
and
wants
they're
people to
like
breed.
they're all test tube kids too, right? I mean,
Yeah, it
that's
would appear so.
yeah.
I really am like secretly hoping that he reads my thing and like because it would. I feel like. Did you see Westworld all by chance, the TV show?
The HBO series. I
Yeah,
saw parts of it. Yeah.
there's elements of that where like when the robot or whatever gets behind the scenes and she picks up the laptop and she starts seeing her own narratives like on the screen, like
Yeah.
her own programming, and then she starts rewriting it. Like that's kind of how I imagine it would be if Elon were to read my article about his birth setup and everything. He might have some kind of weird go haywire, I don't know. Or whatever, but it's spectacular and kind of scary, and strange, um, and really compelling, to me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Well,
big mystery.
it
I don't
it
trust him at all, but then at the same time, I think that like maybe I'm not supposed to trust him. It's just not trusting him is the plan. I don't know exactly.
well, it's interesting because like you can fold him into like a kind of a larger group of people that you don't trust, right?
Yeah,
Like you can fold him into Trump.
sure. Yeah, he is very much like Trump,
Yeah,
which is another.
right, and you can fold him into Alex Jones, and you can
Yeah.
fold him into to some extent Tucker Carlson, right? There,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this gets back to what David Icke, wrote about on Twitter and came at these
Yeah.
guys with. So they all have that minus trust factor in some ways, and
Yeah.
yet it's kind of undeniable that
They're all we've got.
right. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah, that's a dilemma I have all the time because Musk says lots of things that are nobody else is saying, and there seems to be a free speech thing going on X, but at the same time, he is just a defense contractor, and he's wild, and he's pro-Israel, and he's bending the knee in that front. So I don't
Oh
know.
yeah.
All I can do is just look up people's birthdays and see how it all
I
fits.
did kind of a deep dive with Depp and Hunter Thompson and
Mhm.
Amber Beard and Musk with the charts.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Oh,
And I'm convinced that Johnny Depp is possessed by the spirit of Hunter S. Thompson.
well, that would fit right into our whole thesis.
Yeah. And
For
it's in the
sure. That's
chart.
possible.
It's in the chart. You can see it.
Interesting. I would like to hear that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, you should definitely check out this series because I talk about Hunter S. Thompson in there and Johnny Depp and kind of go through it all. And it's an amazing set of synchronicities for sure.
Well, okay, so we'll have the links for all your stuff
Okay.
when we push this live. It strikes me that there's an interesting kind of link between Hunter S. Thompson and Musk, and that when you look at Hunter S. Thompson at times, he looks slightly Asiatic,
Yeah,
and when you look at Musk, he looks slightly Asiatic as well.
that's true. That's true.
They have this kind of weird trans-Asiatic thing going on.
You're right.
Yeah. So
I haven't really looked at Hunter S. Thompson's birth. I'm gonna do that. Connect him to Musk and see what I see.
yeah. Okay, I got one more for you because we're getting close to
Okay.
probably our expiration date for this show. But today is L. Ron Hubbard's birthday.
Oh wow, it is.
And have you
That's
ever
interesting.
gone down the Hubbard rabbit hole, Jack Parsons?
Yeah, I get into Jack Parsons in my Substack too with Elon Musk. There's a pretty spectacularly like tying everything Musk and Wonka together with Jack Parsons, the death of Jack Parsons, which is pretty incredible. It's all about rocketry. These guys
Right.
are rocket men, rock stars essentially,
Right.
and that's sort of that's definitely a trope that's being followed. I guess I could tell you quickly that it's what I found was that what is it exactly? It's oh the birth of the birth of Gene Wilder to
Willy Wonka, right?
Yep, to Elon Musk to Willy Wonka. The midpoint of that is the death of Jack Parsons. And what blew my mind after I published it, a guy brought this to my attention that Elon Musk owned Gene Wilder's house. He lived in Gene Wilder's house.
That's crazy.
He lived across the street, and then he bought it when Gene Wilder died, I guess. And there's this. He gave a Joe Rogan interview. You might remember when he announced that he was going to get rid of all of his possessions. He wasn't going to own anything anymore.
Right.
Liquidate all his possessions except for Gene Wilder's house. He said, I want to preserve the spirit of Gene Wilder, which is a very possession, being John Malkovich kind of thing to say, if you want to read into it that way, like literally preserving the spirit,
Right.
And I couldn't believe that he lived in Willy Wonka's house, which he even says is like, it's a really weird house. There's like secret passageways and hidden doors and all this stuff. It's like, what in the world is going on here?
Absolutely. What's also interesting is that Gene Wilder was bringing it back to Snowpiercer. He was in a train movie, The Silver Streak.
Silver Streak, yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. There's always a new thing. That's what I love talking to people about this stuff.
Yeah. Great stuff, man. These 2 hours have gone by
flown by
so quickly. And it's totally great having you on the show. And
great
we'll have
to be
you back.
Here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. When is your book coming out?
There's no set date. We're still writing it. We're still working on it. So it'll probably be a while, but for now it's my Substack, and I'm going to try to keep posting stuff on there.
Okay. We'll make sure the links
the book does have a title. It's going to be called Project Crypto K.
Crypto K.
So if you're watching this in the future, maybe look out for
it. So you can find Alex over on Twitter at Crypto Kubrology. Go find him. He's a great follow. He's always laying Easter eggs all over Twitter. And do you have an Instagram account too?
Yeah, but it's a personal one, so I don't give it out.
So you don't,
just Substack. Yeah. Just Twitter.
Substack. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And I also appear occasionally on Think Tank on YouTube, which is a weekly show that Andreas Zertus does. So you can find me there occasionally too.
Okay. We'll put some links there as well. This has been great. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Going down the Kubrick rabbit hole. And we get your book published. We'll have you back on, and we'll do some more digging.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, man. Hold on one sec. Let me hit the old stop record.
And there we go. A rather abrupt ending, but it was great. I love that show. And I thought Alex was tremendous. And Claire put a comment in the chat, which was he has a really chill vibe. I agree, right? Just very chill, relaxed, matter of fact. And, the storage capacity that he has for all the data and the details, and following all of these links with Kubrick is really just mind-blowing. So if you like his work, go to his Substack page. The link is in the details of the show, so you can subscribe. And I think you can actually financially support his work as well, like many other Substack writers and publishers. So if you feel so inclined, go for it. What else can I say or have to say about that show? Not much. Although I could go on for hours when we really start to go down into those rabbit holes and even like unveil things in real time, like the Leonard Bernstein birth on August 25th, which tied into like this whole other thing, right? And because I love that shit. And I know a lot of you do too. Like that's the candy. One of the things that we started to touch on but really didn't, I think, come to a point of crystallization or a concrete conclusion. And the great Wendy texted me during the show, and the driver behind all of this. What is the driver behind all of this? And I know that if I ask that, we'll get a ton of answers in the chat, some of which will be similar, some of which will be very dissimilar. An ancient technology, a type of astral AI or organic AI, God, us, maybe we're the ones that are driving it. We don't even know it, right? That's the big question. Like when you look at the map in the time lattice of Kubrick and how he's connected to all these different people and events via dates and time, and even getting into the symbolism of Saturn and how 2001 was actually supposed to be Saturn, right? And they, for whatever reason, they changed it to Jupiter instead. And then the Saturn Moon connection, the Saturn Moon gateway and lock. Just absolutely fascinating stuff. And we live in a time where we're being exposed to so many layers and levels of information that are just it's remarkable, and it's almost more than we can handle or process to some degree. But because we're humans and because we're insatiably curious, and there is a deep desire for us to understand the truth, it propels us forward, and we do our best to navigate and collate and synthesize this really broad amount of data, more than we've ever had at our fingertips at any other time. You could leave this show after its conclusion and go find another podcast or stream on YouTube, go down another rabbit hole, and there you are processing yet another wrinkle in so-called reality. And it feels very concurrent with Pluto and Aquarius, where we're being almost inundated with a type of machine learning in some ways. I've talked about this before, and how one of the things that they developed with AI is this process called machine learning, which is where they will take a program, literally like a program, and in the program ultimately become a type of artificial intelligence. And then what they will do with the program, they won't just program the program to perform a function. They figured out that if they could flood the program with all these different streams of data, that the program itself becomes more complex. And they figured out that when they would put these programs online, that they were able to do things that they weren't being programmed to do. I think the most famous one was one that was set up for, I think it was an insurance company, and it was like having to do with actuarial work, and eventually what this program was able to do was basically predict the deaths of people, right? Like based on all this other material coming at it. That's not what it was supposed to do, but it eventually figured out how to do it, right? And I guess if you're an insurance company, you'd want something like that. But that's just one version of machine learning. And it feels like we're in our own theoretical analog or organic version of that, where we're being flooded with all of these different streams of information. And then the outcome, like those are the inputs, right? The output of that would be novelty, that we would come to some form of new conclusion, or we'd be able to synthesize all these inputs to arrive at a perspective that we weren't able to arrive at previously. And that's just kind of one stream of what's going on with us. There was some talk in chat about ditching your cell phone and having a non-smartphone, right? And then spending more time in nature, and that's another path. But even nature is corrupted. Nature is no longer nature anymore. To really experience nature, you would have to go very deep into nature to have that, naked, raw, organic relationship. But even then, there's frequencies and bandwidth that are floating through the atmosphere that probably even cross-cut the areas that you're in. So even nature isn't nature anymore. And the image that stands out for me are the cell phone towers that are disguised as trees. Like that's a stark image of nature not being nature anymore. And even the genetically modified version of it, part of it, which is overt, and we see this with genetically modified foods, and then the covert modification, which is taking place all the time via geoengineering, spraying, and the frequencies that are changing and altering how our cells interact and how we interact even with each other. So either way you go, you're going to be part of some kind of artificial interface. And I'm not here to promote it. It's just the way it is. And this is our own version of Neuralink in some ways, by being able to spend 2 hours with somebody like Alex and go down these rabbit holes and then crunch all this data. And then the question is, well, what does it mean? And again, I think that it points towards a much bigger picture and question about the nature of reality itself. And I don't know if we come away with any hard answers, but we certainly come away with a lot more interesting questions than we might have had before. And back in the day when I was very earnestly following a kind of strict spiritual path, right? Like I was hardcore about it. And I remember running across this book by this guy named Rashad Field. He wrote 2 really good books, one of which was called The Invisible Way. And it might have been something that came out of Gurdjieff, because these people were kind of Gurdjieffians. And it was live in the question, right? That is the best place to be, to live in the question. Well, it looks like I've frozen up once again, and that means it's time to end the show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for Alex. Check out his Substack, subscribe, and I'll be back on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live as we dance in the field of the stars. Thanks, Shataria. You're the best. Take care, everybody. Love you all, and bye for now.